This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and it's Smackdown time, and this is going to be a hard one if you're on Verizon. Anyway, we have the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 here, probably the premier phablet in Android land with this 5.7-inch display and its S Pen. And here we have the Motorola Droid Turbo with its always-on voice listening commands, also Snapdragon 805 processor, a little bit easier to hold. So how are you going to decide? We're going to find out now. So here we have it, two of the hottest and newest phones available on Verizon Wireless. Of course, the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 is available on all major carriers, so there's that. The Motorola Droid Turbo will be available in South America as the Droid Max. You can see there's our always listening voice commands, getting us in a little trouble there. So really, in the United States, this is for you Verizon people, particularly. Both of these are flagshipy phones, and there's a price difference. So let's get that out of the way first. The Droid Turbo is the usual $199 on contract, and is $600 for this 32 gig with full retail pricing. There's also a 64 gig model for $50 more. Samsung Galaxy Note is one of the most expensive phones. It does have a lot of features and a lot of stuff inside, so that's fair enough, and a big screen. But it's $299 on contract, and on Verizon Wireless, it's $700 full retail. If you're looking at other carriers, of course, most other carriers are charging more right now than that for it. So Verizon's actually kind of the deal when it comes to full retail pricing. Inside, what's the same? An awful lot. That's part of what makes this hard. Two of the first phones to use the quad-core Snapdragon 805 CPU. That's the latest and greatest Snapdragon CPU available for smartphones until we see the Snapdragon 810. Goodness only knows when, probably sometime next year. So right now, a lot of phones are still running on the 801. The 2.7 gigahertz 805 is the speedy kid on the block. Both of these have 3 gigs of RAM inside. I would argue that the Galaxy Note 4 needs it more for a whole lot of software and customizations that's Samsung's put on there, but that's another thing. Both have high-resolution cameras. We have a 16 megapixel camera in our Note 4, and we have a 21 megapixel camera in the Droid, but we're going to go into that into detail because more megapixels isn't always better. Obviously, both of these have 4G LTE, dual-band Wi-Fi, 802.11 AC, Bluetooth, NFC, GPS with GLONASS, and AMOLED displays, and both very high resolution QHD 2560 by 1440 resolution displays. So there's a whole lot that's the same here. They both have very big batteries too. Actually, the Droid Turbo has the bigger battery, but this is a sealed back design, so it is sealed inside. But it's 3,900 milliamps, which does outdo the Samsung Galaxy Note 4. That one has a 3,200 milliamp battery, but you can take off the back and swap the battery out. So both of these support quick charging, and both of them come with a turbocharger in the box. So in terms of battery life, they're pretty darn close. Honestly, the Note series has always been one of the real Energizer bunnies, but the Note 4 so far hasn't been quite as amazingly impressive. It's still a good solid day-and-a-half phone for many people with moderate use, but the same thing is true of the Droid Turbo. It can go about as long as well. And this one also lasts about a day and a half with moderate use. You know, if you use it more lightly, you could probably go 2 days on a charge. If you're seriously into 3D games and GPS navigation, you'll probably only get a day from it. Anyway, they're roughly similar in terms of battery life. So what's the difference? Obviously size. For those of you who think that the Droid Turbo is not so little, it's 5.2 inches now. As 5-inch sort of what the considered mainstream phones go, this is not the smallest, it's not the thinnest, because it has that big battery in there, but obviously it's a lot smaller than the Note 4. So for those of you who think that something like this is about as much as you can tolerate, well, size does matter. Next important point, the S Pen. For those of you who like note-taking, diagramming, drawing, writing on your screen, you can annotate anything with the pen. Well, it's going to be a Galaxy Note for you. That's a pretty unique feature among smartphones these days, and it is very handy for those of you who may have use of it. Now, if you've owned a Note before and you found you never used the pen, then you can say, okay, that feature doesn't matter to me. That one is up to you. Another thing is signal strength. Now, these days, especially since most phones are running on the same Snapdragon chipset, you don't see a whole lot of variation in signal strength. In moderate signal areas and strong signal areas, these guys do about the same. We're not too bad here right now, and they are just about the same. But in weak signal areas, the Moto doesn't do quite as well as the Note 4. Now, the Note 4 is one of the strongest reception phones on Verizon. So if you're in a very poor reception area, it probably would be the phone for you. Now notice right now they're actually doing pretty well because we're in an area that isn't so weak. We have another area of our offices that is kind of But watch one thing that happens with our Moto. If we touch it up top, do you see how much the signal just dropped? It dropped by like 5 decibels. Lower numbers are worse, actually, in signal reception. So if the number gets higher, that's a bad thing. The same thing happens with Wi-Fi if you touch the top area here. That's not something that happens with our Samsung. So we got the Samsung here, and I can touch it pretty much anywhere, bigger area to touch. It doesn't really care. So that's just an interesting thing there to note. Some people complain about their Wi-Fi reception on the Moto. Now, I haven't found it to be absolutely horrible. It's just not as strong as the range on, well, the Samsung has really good Wi-Fi reception among phones, but even compared to our laptops and some of our other phones, it doesn't get quite the same distance before you see the signal actually start to drop, and the speeds will drop off. It's not hideous, it's just not as strong. But this right here is a little bit worrisome. Now, how about display brightness? A lot of you have said that you think the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 is the brighter phone, and as it measures with a colorimeter, it is indeed, especially if you have auto brightness turned on in a bright environment, because it actually will get brighter than maximum manually set brightness. Right now we have both of these manually set to their brightest setting, and they look pretty similar, don't they? So the everyday experience actually isn't that huge a divide. Where the Samsung becomes noticeably brighter, it has a special outdoor crazy 750 nit brightness mode it goes into. Now it looks a little distorted and Instagrammy when it does it, but it ensures high readability even in bright Texas sunlight like we have here. But as you can see, right now we have this set for adaptive color. Samsung gives you a couple of different color profiles. Motorola just goes with one. And there's some people have described it as being warm. It's actually not that warm. It's a little bit more color accurate. It's sort of like choosing AMOLED photo mode on the Samsung. But some of you will have a preference, I think, for the somewhat more still vivid colors on the Note. It's tuned to actually be more vivid in an adaptive display mode. And a lot of people like those incredibly zingy, better than life colors. These are turned off. This is about how notification systems work, and other than, as you saw me actually waking up the Droid Turbo just by, well, speaking to it, addressing it, it uses, instead of having a notification LED, like up in the corner here, there's a blue pulsing LED on our Samsung Galaxy Note 4. You'll no doubt notice. That's one form of notification. Some of you like that. Just look at your desk and you see there's an LED flashing, knowing you need to do something. This guy right here uses the IR sensors on the front, so you can wave your hand and I say, aha, I have an email. And if I drag this up, I can actually get a preview of the email. So 2 different ways of handling notification. This is for those of you who like to do that kind of thing and just at a glance see what's going on. The other way is just look to see if there's a light flashing on your phone. I think this is kind of a little cooler and more sophisticated, but it really depends on your needs. Also, when it comes to things like Moto Voice, it is pretty neat that it's always on, it's always listening. Even if it's sitting on your desk, you can address it, you can have it do something. You don't have to turn it on to actually say, okay, Google now. So there's a little advantage there too. Now, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. For the Samsung Galaxy Note 4, undeniably, this is one of the best looking phones that they have made yet. You got metal on the sides. It's still the faux leather on the back. Available in your choice of charcoal black or white. Not a bad looking phone. Straight edges I find make it easier to hold, say, compared to something like the iPhone 6 Plus that's real slippery and not so grippy. This one has a pretty good grip on it. The white one, a little bit less grippy, but still not bad. The Droid Turbo droids are always out there looking designs, and I like the fact that it's gotten influenced more by Motorola and not the Verizon angry robot team right there. So you got more curves, a little bit reminiscent of the Moto X, say. Now it's available in crazy Kevlar red, a more sedate Kevlar black. Now these are not exactly soft touch finishes, but they're not slippery finishes either. And then there's ballistic nylon, kind of like your durable backpack kind of thing, which actually I find to be a little bit more slippery, but interesting materials, very sturdy. Gorilla Glass 3 on the front here. Both of these are actually relatively sturdy phones. I have dropped this. Nothing has happened to it. But the Samsung Galaxy Note 4, as we know, if you're insane and you try to bend it, you could bend it, but Samsung is always good at designing these to handle drops pretty well, and they do. The back cover might pop off. It's designed to absorb impact and to release energy by doing so, but this is a removable back, so that's really not a very big deal. So in terms of actual looks and materials, it honestly depends on which you like better, and whether you're into the Kevlar underneath for sturdiness and little metal-infused plastic on the surface or ballistic nylon versus the Galaxy Note look. For you security-minded folks, this has a fingerprint scanner embedded in the home button. It is improved over the Samsung Galaxy S5, which means you still have to swipe up and down. It's not like Touch ID on an iPhone, but it's gotten more accurate where maybe 90–95% of the time it actually works. And they've also tried to develop a way that you can use your thumb going sideways. You still have to swipe it though. It's a little bit trickier to do that, but it's there. So for those of you who like the idea of security at that level, this has it. The Moto doesn't. Also, this has an IR blaster for AV remote control to control your home theater gear. You know, Samsung, everything in the kitchen sink. Now, one of the most important things is actually the software experience for a lot of you folks. So, I mean, the Samsung Galaxy Note 4, sure, it has every feature you could ever want on it. It runs Android 4.4.4 KitKat, just like the Motorola, but very different design philosophy. Motorola is very influenced by Google and their clean, obviously they make the original OS before it gets any UIs or toppings on top, shall we say. Anyway, Google owned Motorola at the time that this device was developed. Just recently Lenovo has taken over Motorola, but that's neither here nor there in terms of what this device has to offer. Very clean experience right here. Quick UI, no lags. It's a clean Android open source implementation. Other than Moto Assist, Moto Voice, those couple of little useful things that they put on here to make using the device actually a little bit easier, it's all clean Android. It's all very quick. It's also supposed to get updates more quickly for the operating system. For example, we expect Lollipop will probably be here before the end of this year. Samsung has not even said yet when the Note 4 is going to see Android 5.0 Lollipop. So for those of you who are cool with Samsung phones and you like TouchWiz, that whole UI, heavy overlays here, customization of the icons, the settings screen even is quite different from the standard Android one. You get the idea. If you're an Android purist, if you like it clean and light, then the Moto is going to be the one for you. If you don't mind TouchWiz and you like all the features that it adds, well, then the Samsung is going to be for you. And there's an interesting thing there about multitasking too, because Samsung, as we know, has always had that split window view where you can have two apps running at once. Now you can even have applications running in floating windows. So here we have the split view of multitasking. We have the web browser up here, the calendar here, and if you want to make these into floating windows, you can even do that as well. And you can minimize them. So it's pretty neat. This is really like a computer in your pocket. For those of you who are power users who want something as much like a computer as possible, it's going to be the Samsung Galaxy Note 4. Now we're going to talk about the camera application. Speaking of multitasking, here's my little floating calendar right there. And see, you can pop that up just in a neat little window like that. So there's an example of the floating multitasking. We're going to close that away right now. So Samsung, for as much as their UI is busy, you know, I like their camera application pretty well. It's fairly clean and clear. You can change your modes here. Pretty self-explanatory stuff. You can go to advanced settings there. It's not overwhelming. They have a lot of effects, a lot of filters, all that sort of thing. But in the end, it counts. What kind of picture does it take? 16 megapixel camera here with HDR. Very, very good camera, particularly in good lighting. It's one of the nicer cameras on the market. It's right up there competing with the iPhone 6 Plus, which has a great camera. In fact, it has optical image stabilization. It's fast enough to shoot. It can shoot 4K videos. Most every time you're going to get a good shot with this. Now, in low light, it's better than the Galaxy S5, which really was kind of sad in low light. It's still not a low light king, but it's not absolutely hideous. Now, our Motorola has an impressive 21 megapixel camera that uses a Sony sensor, but you know, Motorola has never been the king when it comes to cameras. And it's a little bit better than the Moto X 2014 edition. It does capture more pixels. You have a simpler camera UI here, obviously switching between front and back cameras, switching to video mode. Both of these can shoot 4K video, by the way. And if you want to get to settings, you have the Google circular style UI right there. Control your flash, HDR, automatic, that sort of thing. You can tap to focus, which is a good thing because this tends to sometimes pick the wrong focal point. That's one of the complaints that I have with it. That it's also not the real quickest to shoot. Now, I'm sure we'll see some firmware updates that are going to help with that. And in outdoor good lighting, it actually takes also very lovely shots. Not so much indoor lighting, though. Not so great there. So not a hideous camera, but not as good as the Samsung Galaxy Note 4. Now, how about call quality? Both of these actually have very clear and crisp incoming and outgoing voice. One thing about the Droid Turbo, and I would hope that they're going to fix this with a over-the-air software update, the earpiece volume, earpiece is right over here, not terribly loud. Also off center, it's off to the right side a little bit. So once you get used to that and you hold it properly, it does help it. If you tend to call from noisy locations and actually hold these big bad boys against your ear, well, Droid Turbo, at least as of right now, doesn't have as loud an earpiece. One last important point is removable storage. Our Droid Turbo does not have any removable storage, no micro SD card slot. Our Samsung Galaxy Note has the SD card slot under the back. You rip off the skinny plastic door, and there's our SD card slot. For those of you who really want to expand the available storage beyond the initial 32 gigs, that's an important point. Now, Google with KitKat, they kind of made it harder to put apps on SD cards and all that sort of thing. Sometimes it can be a pain, but Samsung has actually hacked or customized the OS, and I find that it works more reliably. Their file manager can actually handle copying things to and from a card pretty well. I have no problem saving photos and videos that I take with the camera to a card, so it works pretty well there. So for those of you who just require that removable storage, this would have to be your phone. So that's the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 versus the Motorola Droid Turbo, both available now on Verizon, $299 versus $199 on contract, and $700 versus $600 off contract if you're buying it full retail. And as you can see, there's not a clear winner here. It's really about what you want. Do you want the clean Android experience? Do you want the biggest screen and the brightest screen possible? Do you want an S Pen? You get the idea. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to watch our video reviews of each of these products, read our written reviews on mobiletechreview.com, and subscribe.